The night wind moved slowly through the ancient trees of Jetavana Monastery. Oil lamps flickered softly beneath the hanging branches, and the monks sat in complete silence around the Blessed One. Beyond the monastery walls, the world had already fallen asleep. Only the distant sound of insects and the whispering leaves remained awake beneath the stars. The Buddha rested beneath the dim golden glow of the lamps, his face calm as still water. For a long time, he said nothing. The silence itself seemed to deepen the night. Then, at last, the Blessed One opened his eyes and looked upon the assembly of monks. "Bhikkhus," he said gently, his voice low like distant thunder hidden beyond mountains, "there are many who seek wisdom, but few who understand the price of it." The monks listened carefully. Some lowered their heads. Some folded their hands tighter in reverence. Others felt an inexplicable chill move through their hearts, as though the air itself had become heavier. The Buddha continued. "In ages long before this present world, before kingdoms now remembered had risen from dust, there stood a sacred mountain beside the snowy ranges of the north." As he spoke, the darkness of the monastery seemed to dissolve. The monks could almost see it. An endless mountain beneath silver moonlight. Cliffs wrapped in ancient pine forests. Rivers shining like flowing mercury. Snow drifting slowly through silent black skies. And there, hidden among the valleys and caves of the sacred mountain, lived 1,000 wheel-turning kings. They had once ruled vast lands. Their banners had covered deserts and oceans. Their armies had shaken the earth. Jewels brighter than fire filled their palaces. But eventually, each king came to understand the same terrible truth: power could not silence fear. Gold could not stop aging. Pleasure could not cure sorrow. And no kingdom, however glorious, could protect the heart from death. So one by one, they abandoned their thrones. They left behind queens, palaces, musicians, armies, perfumes, feasts, and all worldly pleasures. Together, the 1,000 kings climbed into the mountains. Not to conquer the world, but to conquer themselves. The Buddha's voice grew softer. They sought the supreme way. The monks sat motionless. In their minds, the mountain became clearer. The 1,000 kings lived in caves carved into cliffs of black stone. Some meditated beside waterfalls. Others sat beneath cedar trees unmoving for entire seasons. During the mornings, cold mist covered the valleys like white silk. At night, the stars stretched endlessly above them. No one spoke loudly there. Even the wind seemed careful not to disturb the silence. Years passed upon the mountain. The kings ate only wild fruits, roots, and clear spring water. They wore robes woven from rough fibers. Their bodies became thin. Their minds became disciplined. And yet, despite all their practice, Many still feared suffering. Many still feared death. Some secretly dreamed of the lives they once possessed. Because abandoning a kingdom was easy, abandoning attachment was not. One evening, as the 1,000 kings gathered near a cliffside grove to hear teachings from the eldest among them, the sky suddenly darkened. Not naturally. The darkness came too quickly. Birds stopped singing. The mountain winds froze. Even the insects vanished into silence. A terrible smell spread through the forest. Hot. Metallic. Like burning flesh mixed with blood. The kings slowly turned toward the northern cliffs. And there, something enormous was moving through the trees. At first, it resembled a walking mountain. Then the shape emerged fully beneath the moonlight. The monks listening to the Buddha felt their own breathing slow. The creature was beyond human imagination. A gigantic yaksha. Its body stretched for thousands of miles in the language of myth. Its skin was dark red, like iron heated inside a furnace. Its mouth was lined with towering fangs sharp as spears. Its face alone seemed wider than a city gate, and its eyes burned like molten copper. Streams of bloody light flowed from them into the darkness. In its left hand, it carried a massive sword blackened with ancient stains. In its right, a steel fork large enough to impale elephants. Each step caused the mountain valleys to tremble. Trees cracked beneath its feet. Snow fell from distant cliffs. Yet worst of all was its hunger. The kings could feel it before the creature even spoke. A hunger older than reason. A hunger without mercy. The yaksha stopped before the 1,000 kings. Its breathing sounded like storms trapped inside caves. Then it laughed. The sound echoed across the snowy mountains and frightened flocks of birds into the night sky. "O kings!" it growled. Its voice was wet and terrible. "I am starving." Several kings instinctively stepped backward. Others closed their eyes and tried to steady their minds. The creature leaned forward. Its burning eyes scanned them slowly. "I have wandered these mountains for many days without food," it said. "My throat burns. My stomach devours itself. Have pity on me." The kings remained silent. Then the yaksha lifted its sword. "Feed me." The mountain wind stopped completely. The 1,000 kings looked at one another. Fear spread silently through the gathering. Because deep inside, every one of them understood. This was not a being that desired ordinary food. And still, they had once vowed to give all things freely. The eldest king stepped forward at last. Though frightened, he bowed respectfully. "Great being," he said carefully, "we have renounced the world in search of truth. We have sworn to practice generosity without limit. If you are hungry, we will offer what we can." The other kings quickly gathered fruits from woven baskets. Golden peaches, mountain pears, wild figs, crystal spring water. They washed the yiksha's hands according to ancient custom and laid the fruits before it respectfully. For a brief moment, silence returned. Then, the yiksha stared at the offerings. Its expression changed. Slowly, its eyes widened with fury. The creature suddenly swept its arm across the ground. The fruits exploded across the stones. Water splashed into the dirt. The mountain echoed with the roar of the enraged demon. "Fools!" The kings recoiled. The yiksha's mouth opened wide, revealing rows of glistening fangs. "My father," it thundered, "was a yiksha who fed upon the breath of living men. My mother was a rakshasi who tore open human chests and drank blood while it was still warm." Its burning gaze swept across the assembly. "And you offer me fruit?" The creature pointed its giant fork toward the kings. "I do not hunger for pears. I do not hunger for roots. I hunger for hearts." Its voice dropped lower. "For blood." The mountain seemed to grow colder. Several kings trembled visibly. One king whispered prayers beneath his breath. Another quietly wept. The yiksha took one heavy step forward. "Give me human flesh," it demanded, "or I shall feed upon all of you." The 1,000 kings stood frozen beneath the moonlight. And in that terrible silence, the true test of their vows had finally arrived. The mountain remained silent after the yiksha's roar. No wind moved through the cedar trees. No bird dared to cry out. Even the drifting snow seemed suspended in the frozen night. The 1,000 kings stood beneath the pale moonlight, facing the monstrous being before them. And for the first time since abandoning their kingdoms, many of them truly understood fear. Not the fear of losing wealth. Not the fear of humiliation. But the ancient terror buried deep inside every living creature, the fear of pain, the fear of death, the fear of losing the body itself. The yiksha towered over them like a nightmare carved from darkness and blood. Its burning eyes watched the kings one by one, waiting, smelling their fear, enjoying it. "Why are you silent now?" the creature asked. Its voice rolled through the valley like falling boulders. "You spoke proudly of generosity. You claimed to seek truth. You called yourselves seekers of the supreme way. The Yiksha leaned closer. But now that death stands before you, its enormous mouth twisted into a grin, your courage disappears. Several kings lowered their heads in shame. Others clenched trembling fists beneath their robes. One younger king stepped forward suddenly. His face was pale. "Great being," he said carefully, trying to steady his breath, "surely there are other creatures within these mountains. Deer wander the valleys. Wild oxen move through the forests. If you hunger for flesh, we can help you hunt." The Yiksha's expression darkened instantly. Its sword slammed into the earth beside the king. The impact split the stone ground apart. "No." The word echoed like thunder. "I did not come for beasts." The creature's nostrils flared. "I smell discipline in your blood. I smell vows in your hearts. The flesh of ordinary creatures cannot satisfy me." The younger king stumbled backward. The Yiksha continued, "You speak of compassion. You speak of renunciation. But words are light as smoke." Its burning gaze swept across the assembly. "Show me truth with flesh." The kings fell into uneasy silence again. Far away, snow drifted from the mountain cliffs in slow white curtains. At the edge of the gathering stood an elderly king whose hair had already turned silver during years of ascetic practice. He whispered quietly to the king beside him. "What shall we do?" The second king answered bitterly. "We vowed to give all things freely, but who among us truly meant it?" Another king shut his eyes tightly. "I abandoned my kingdom," he murmured. "I abandoned my wives, my children, my armies." His voice trembled. "But I cannot abandon this body." The eldest among them heard those words. Slowly, he looked around at the 1,000 rulers gathered beneath the dark sky. Once, every one of them had commanded nations. Yet now, before death, they were no different from frightened children. The old king stepped toward the Yiksha again. "Great being," he said respectfully, "the body is difficult to surrender. Even sages fear pain. Surely there must be another path." The Yiksha stared at him for a very long time. Then, unexpectedly, the creature began to laugh. Not angrily this time, but coldly, mockingly. Its laughter rolled through the valleys like distant avalanches. "You seek enlightenment," it growled, "yet cling to skin and bone." Then the Yiksha slowly lifted its enormous face toward the moonlit sky. Its bloody eyes burned brighter, and in a voice that seemed to shake both earth and heaven, it began to recite a verse. "To seek the deathless truth, one must not cling to body or mind. One must endure cutting and suffering. As the great earth endures all things, give without attachment. Seek wisdom without regret. Hold nothing back. As one would extinguish flames upon one's own head. Relieve the hunger and thirst of all beings. This is the path of the Bodhisattva. The moment the verse ended, the mountain fell into profound silence. Even the Yiksha itself became still. The 1,000 kings stood frozen, because the words had pierced deeper than fear. They had pierced the heart. Some kings lowered their heads in sorrow. Others felt shame rise within them like fire. The vow they once spoke proudly now returned to confront them. What was generosity? If it ended where fear began? What was compassion? If it survived only while convenient? And what was spiritual practice? If the self remained more precious than truth itself? The cold night deepened. No one moved. Then, from somewhere near the back of the gathering, a single voice spoke softly. I understand. The kings turned. Standing beneath a cedar tree was a lone Brahmin ascetic. Unlike the 1,000 kings, he possessed no royal ornaments, no attendants, no reputation among rulers. His robes were simple and weathered by snow and wind. His body was thin from years of wandering. Yet his eyes were astonishingly calm. The elder king recognized him. Lajapati, he whispered. The Brahmin slowly stepped forward into the moonlight. Snowflakes drifted quietly around him. He bowed first to the kings, then to the terrifying Yiksha. Finally, he gazed upward into the dark sky filled with stars. The mountain wind moved gently through his robes. I have wandered many lifetimes seeking the way, he said softly. I have studied rituals. I have practiced austerities. I have meditated in forests and deserts. He closed his eyes briefly. But only tonight have I heard the true teaching. The king stared at him in disbelief. One ruler stepped forward urgently. Do not misunderstand the demon's words, he warned. This creature seeks only blood. Another king added quickly, even if generosity is virtuous, self-destruction cannot be wisdom. But Lajapati only smiled faintly. The body was always temporary. His voice carried no fear. No one escapes death. Kings cannot command it away. Hermits cannot hide from it. Even mountains eventually crumble into dust. The Yiksha watched him carefully now. Its burning eyes narrowed. The Brahmin looked toward the creature. You came here hungry, he said. Yes, the Yiksha answered. You came searching for flesh. Yes. And if someone freely offers it? The creature's massive grip tightened around its sword. Then I shall consume them. Several kings cried out immediately. No. This is madness. Think carefully." But Lajapati remained peaceful. For the first time that night, someone stood before the Yaksha without terror. The Brahmin turned slowly toward the 1,000 kings. "You abandoned kingdom seeking enlightenment," he said gently. "But tonight, fear has shown us the truth hidden inside ourselves." No one answered, because everyone knew he spoke honestly. Lajapati gazed toward the distant snowy peaks. "How many lifetimes," he whispered, "have we protected these fragile bodies?" His hand slowly touched his own chest. How many wars were fought for flesh? How many lies spoken for survival? How many beings harmed because we feared suffering? The mountain wind grew colder. Yet his voice remained warm. "If this body must eventually vanish." He looked directly at the Yaksha. "Then let it vanish for something meaningful." The king stared at him in horror. And deep above the snowy mountains, hidden among the silent stars, unseen gods had already begun to watch. The Brahmin stood quietly beneath the cedar tree. Moonlight drifted across his weathered robes like pale water. Snowflakes settled upon his shoulders and melted slowly against the warmth of his skin, yet he seemed not to notice the cold at all. The 1,000 kings stared at him in silence. No one understood how such calm could exist in the presence of death. The Yaksha watched him carefully. Its burning eyes narrowed with growing curiosity. Unlike the trembling kings, this frail human did not smell of panic. He smelled of resolve. The mountain winds began to move again, slowly passing through the forest like invisible spirits. Far above the snowy cliffs, clouds drifted across the stars. The Brahmin took another step forward. "My name," he said softly, "is Lajapati." His voice was gentle, almost quiet enough to disappear into the night air. "I was not born a king. I possess no kingdom. No army would die for me. No palace remembers my footsteps." He smiled faintly. "I have nothing to lose except this temporary body." Several kings immediately shook their heads. "You speak recklessly," one warned. Another stepped forward anxiously. "A human life is not so easily discarded." Lajapati turned toward them peacefully. "And yet," he asked, "does it not vanish anyway?" No one answered. The Brahmin slowly looked upward toward the night sky. "When I was young," he said, I believed wisdom could be gained through sacred texts alone. His eyes reflected the distant stars. So I memorized scriptures until my voice grew hoarse. I learned rituals older than dynasties. I debated philosophy beside kings and scholars. The mountain air grew still around him. But every teacher eventually died. His expression softened. Every philosopher grew old. Every priest became dust. And every answer faded like smoke in the wind. The kings listened in silence, because many of them had discovered the same truth after lifetimes of luxury and power. Raudrabhuti continued walking slowly toward the Yiksha. When knowledge could not satisfy me, I sought suffering instead. The kings watched him carefully now. I fasted until my bones showed through my skin. I slept upon stone. I wandered burning deserts and frozen mountains. His eyes remained calm. I thought pain itself would purify the soul. The Yiksha tilted its enormous head. And did it? The creature asked. Raudrabhuti smiled sadly. No. The answer echoed softly through the forest. Pain only revealed more pride. The kings lowered their eyes, because they understood those words too. Many of them had secretly become proud of their renunciation, proud of their discipline, proud of their spiritual endurance. Even asceticism could become another form of ego. The Brahmin stopped only a short distance before the towering Yiksha now. Against the gigantic demon, he appeared smaller than a candle before a storm. Yet strangely, the balance of fear had begun to change. The Yiksha no longer looked entirely dominant. The creature studied the Brahmin in silence. "You do not fear me," it finally said. Raudrabhuti answered honestly. "I do." The Yiksha blinked. The kings exchanged confused glances. "But your fear does not control you," the creature growled. The Brahmin nodded slowly. "For many years," he said, "I believed courage meant destroying fear." He placed one hand gently upon his chest. "But true courage is seeing fear clearly, and walking forward anyway." The mountain winds moved through the cedar branches overhead. The stars shone cold and distant above them. Raudrabhuti turned briefly toward the 1,000 kings. "You all abandoned kingdoms because you saw the suffering hidden beneath worldly pleasure." The kings remained silent. "You saw that beauty fades. Power collapses. Life disappears." His voice became softer. But somewhere along the path, he looked at them carefully. "Many of us became attached to being spiritual." The word struck deeply. Some kings immediately lowered their heads. Others felt shame burn within them, because it was true. They had abandoned wealth, yet secretly treasured the identity of being holy men. They desired enlightenment, but still protected themselves. The Brahmin continued, a person may wear rags and still worship the self. The forest fell completely still. One may sleep upon stone, eat only roots, meditate for decades. He looked toward the Yiksha, and still fear losing the body more than losing truth. The demon's burning eyes remained fixed upon him. Then slowly, for the first time that night, the Yiksha lowered its weapon slightly. Not in mercy, but in attention. The creature was listening. Lajapati stepped closer. The kings behind him became terrified. "Stop," one shouted. "It will kill you." Another cried out, "If you die here, your practice ends." The Brahmin turned back toward them with peaceful eyes. "No," he said softly. "If truth is real, then compassion does not end with death." The kings fell silent again. Those words lingered heavily in the freezing air. The Yiksha's breathing slowed. Its enormous form stood motionless beneath the moon. Lajapati looked directly into the creature's molten eyes. "You hunger," he said. "Yes," the Yiksha replied. "You suffer." The creature hesitated, then answered, "Yes." The Brahmin nodded. "All beings trapped in desire suffer." The Yiksha's massive claws tightened around its sword handle. "Do not preach to me, human," it growled. But the anger in its voice had weakened. Lajapati showed no reaction. "When hunger controls the mind," he said gently, "even demons become slaves." The forest trembled softly. Not from violence, but from something deeper. The words were beginning to wound the Yiksha itself. The creature suddenly roared, "I was born into hunger." Its voice shattered snow from the trees. "My father devoured human breath. My mother drank blood from broken bodies. This hunger flows through my bones." The kings trembled again. But Lajapati remained still. "And does it bring you peace?" he asked quietly. The Yiksha froze. The question hung in the night like a blade. For several moments, the demon said nothing. Its burning eyes flickered. Then, at last, "No." The answer came like distant thunder. The Brahmin nodded slowly. "Then feeding hunger cannot cure hunger." The Yiksha stared at him in silence. The mountain itself seemed to listen. Lajapati lifted his face toward the stars once more. "In countless lives," he whispered, "beings consume one another seeking satisfaction." His voice drifted like smoke through the freezing air. "Kings consume nations. Merchants consume the poor. Animals consume the weak. And hatred consumes the heart." The wind carried snow between them. But desire never says enough. The 1,000 kings stood motionless. No teaching they had ever heard felt as alive as this moment. The Brahmin closed his eyes briefly. Then he spoke again. If this body can become an offering. His hand slowly pressed against his chest. Perhaps one moment of true compassion may break the chain of endless hunger. Suddenly the earth beneath the mountain groaned softly. The trees trembled. Far beneath the roots of the forest, ancient spirits had awakened. And unseen within the darkness, the gods themselves had begun to weep. The mountain groaned softly beneath the snow. At first, the 1,000 kings believed it was only distant thunder echoing through the cliffs. But then the ground trembled again. Small stones rolled down the slopes. Frozen branches shook violently. Thin cracks spread across the earth beneath their feet. The king stepped backward in alarm. The yiksha lifted its burning eyes toward the forest. Something ancient was awakening. Raudrabhuti remained still. His gaze stayed calm beneath the drifting snow, as though he had already accepted whatever destiny approached through the darkness. Then, from deep below the mountain, a pale golden light slowly emerged. The earth split open beside the cedar grove. Not violently, but gradually, like soil parting for a seed. A warm radiance rose from beneath the roots of the ancient trees. And from that glowing emerged figures unlike any mortal beings. The mountain spirits had come. Some appeared tall and translucent, their bodies woven from flowing mist and moonlight. Others resembled old trees given human form, with bark like skin and eyes glowing faintly green. There were river spirits clothed in shimmering blue light, stone guardians with bodies like cracked granite. Tiny luminous beings drifting through the air like sparks from sacred fire. The entire forest suddenly felt alive. Even the wind carried whispers. The 1,000 kings stared in astonishment. Many immediately lowered themselves in reverence. For these were not ordinary spirits. These were the ancient protectors of the sacred mountain. Beings who had silently watched generations rise and disappear beneath the endless sky. At their center stepped forth a radiant earth deity. Its body shone with soft golden light, neither male nor female, vast yet compassionate. When it spoke, its voice sounded like rivers flowing beneath stone. Raudrabhuti. The Brahmin turned respectfully and bowed. The spirit looked upon him with profound sorrow. Great ascetic, it said, do not cast away your life for the sake of a demon. The forest became silent again. Even the Yiksha did not interrupt. The earth deity continued, for countless ages we have guarded this mountain. We have watched sages meditate beneath these trees. We have watched kings abandon greed and violence. Its glowing eyes dimmed slightly. But rarely have we seen one whose compassion burns as fiercely as yours. The spirit stepped closer. If you die tonight, it said gently, many beings will grieve. The spirits of rivers will mourn. The guardians of forests will mourn. Even the unseen gods in the heavens will weep. A cold wind passed through the trees. The earth deity lowered its head. Please, it whispered, do not feed yourself to darkness. Several kings immediately nodded in agreement. Yes, one cried. The spirits themselves warn against this. Another stepped forward urgently. Compassion should preserve life, not destroy it. The Yiksha's eyes narrowed again. Its claws tightened around the black sword. But Lajapati simply listened quietly. Snow continued falling around him. Finally, he spoke. This body, he said softly, was never truly mine. The kings fell silent. The earth deity looked at him sadly. Lajapati touched his chest lightly. When I was born, this body appeared through causes beyond my control. He raised his eyes toward the stars. One day, it will vanish the same way. The mountain spirits watched him carefully. The Brahman's voice remained calm and gentle. We call the body self, yet it changes every moment. Childhood disappears. Youth disappears. Strength disappears. He slowly opened his hand toward the night air. And eventually even memory disappears. The forest winds whispered softly through the branches. Lajapati turned toward the glowing spirits. If something is temporary from the beginning, he smiled faintly. Why cling to it in terror? The earth deity answered immediately. Because suffering is real. Its voice trembled with compassion. Pain is real. Death is real. The grief of losing someone is real. The Brahmin nodded. Yes. He did not deny it. That is exactly why compassion matters. The spirits fell silent. Lajapati continued, if all beings suffer, then what greater offering can exist than relieving suffering itself? The Yiksha's burning eyes flickered again. The mountain air grew strangely heavy. The Brahmin looked directly toward the terrifying demon. This creature is trapped in endless hunger, he said. The Yiksha growled softly. Lajapati did not react. If no one answers hatred with compassion, he continued, then hatred simply continues forever. The words drifted through the snowy forest like distant bells. One of the younger mountain spirits stepped forward anxiously. "But this Yiksha kills," the spirit protested. "It devours life. How can such a being deserve compassion?" For the first time, the Brahmin's eyes grew deeply sorrowful. Because suffering transforms beings into monsters. The forest fell utterly still. Hatred creates hatred. Fear creates cruelty. Hunger creates violence. He looked toward the Yiksha again. And beings trapped inside suffering forget their own original nature. The demon's breathing became uneven. Its burning eyes shifted slightly downward. Lajapati stepped closer still. Now only a few steps separated human and demon. The kings behind him trembled in disbelief. One whispered, "He truly intends to die." Another quietly began to cry. The earth deity stretched out glowing hands desperately. "Lajapati," it pleaded, "many paths lead toward enlightenment. Why choose one filled with blood?" The Brahmin closed his eyes briefly. When he spoke again, his voice sounded almost like prayer. "Because vows mean nothing until they cost something." The mountain shook softly once more. Far above the clouds, unseen heavenly beings listened in silence. The kings felt chills run through their entire bodies. Lajapati opened his eyes. "For countless lives," he whispered, "I protected myself first." Images seemed to move behind his gaze. Sometimes as king. Sometimes as merchant. Sometimes as warrior. Sometimes as priest. His voice became quieter. And every lifetime ended the same way. Snow drifted across the dark earth. Fear. Loss. Death. The Brahmin slowly looked toward the Yiksha. But tonight, a faint warmth entered his expression. Perhaps one life may finally become useful. The earth deity's radiant form trembled. Tears of golden light began falling from its eyes onto the frozen ground. Even the mountain spirits started weeping softly. Because they understood, the Brahmin had already made his decision. And somewhere deep inside the endless darkness, even the Yiksha itself had begun to suffer. Snow continued falling through the silent forest. The mountain spirits stood motionless around the cedar grove, their glowing forms dim beneath the vast night sky. The 1,000 kings no longer spoke. Some closed their eyes in grief. Some trembled openly. Others stared at Raudrabhuti as though watching someone already walking beyond the world of the living. Only the Yiksha remained unmoving before him. Its gigantic form towered over the gathering like a dark mountain soaked in blood. Yet something inside the creature had changed. The rage burning within its molten eyes no longer appeared pure. Now there was confusion. And beneath that confusion, something dangerously close to sorrow. Raudrabhuti slowly stepped closer. The snow beneath his feet crunched softly. The mountain wind carried the scent of cedar, cold stone, and distant ice. For one long moment, neither man nor demon spoke. Then the Brahmin bowed respectfully toward the Yiksha. "Great being," he said gently, "you came seeking relief from suffering." The Yiksha's claws tightened. "Yes. I cannot erase your hunger forever." The creature stared silently. "But perhaps compassion may plant a seed deeper than hunger itself." The Yiksha's enormous chest rose and fell slowly. No one had ever spoken to it this way. Not as monster. Not as enemy. But as a suffering being. The 1,000 kings watched in disbelief. One whispered shakily, "How can he show kindness to such a creature?" An older king answered quietly, "Because his compassion no longer depends on whether something deserves it." The words lingered heavily in the frozen air. Raudrabhuti turned slightly toward the kings. "In many lives," he said softly, "we love only what feels safe." His eyes moved across their frightened faces. "We show kindness to beauty, gentleness to those who agree with us, patience to those who cause no harm." The Brahmin's expression became deeply sorrowful. But true compassion begins precisely where fear appears. No one answered. Because every heart present understood the truth inside those words. The mountain spirits lowered their glowing eyes. Even the wind seemed to quiet itself in reverence. Raudrabhuti looked back toward the Yiksha. "I once hated beings like you," he admitted calmly. The demon's burning eyes narrowed slightly. "In another lifetime, I was a warrior king." Snow drifted between them like pale ash. "I slaughtered enemies believing violence could protect goodness." His voice remained steady. But hatred only gave birth to more hatred. The forest fell completely silent. "I killed those I called evil, yet my own heart became filled with darkness." The Yiksha listened without moving. Raudrabhuti slowly extended one empty hand toward the creature. "So tonight, I refuse to answer suffering with fear." The Yiksha's breathing became rougher. The kings behind him exchanged frightened glances. One suddenly stepped forward desperately. "Enough." It was the silver-haired elder king. His voice cracked with emotion. You have already proven your wisdom. No vow requires this madness. Several other kings immediately agreed. Yes. The path cannot demand self-destruction. You owe nothing to this demon. But Lajapati only smiled gently. You are wrong. The kings froze. The Brahmin looked toward them with eyes full of compassion. I owe everything to suffering. The cold wind moved softly through the trees. Without suffering, would never have sought truth. Without loss, I would never have awakened compassion. His hand slowly touched his own heart again, and without fear, I would never have discovered courage. The elder king's eyes filled with tears. But if you die, he whispered, your journey ends here. Lajapati shook his head slowly. A journey built only for oneself deserves to end. Those words struck the kings like thunder. For many years they had pursued enlightenment, hoping to free themselves from suffering. But this man, this simple wandering Brahmin, had somehow stepped beyond even that desire. The Yiksha suddenly spoke. Human. Its monstrous voice echoed quietly through the snow. Do you truly understand what you offer? Lajapati met its burning gaze calmly. Yes. You will feel pain. Yes. You will die. Yes. The creature's claws trembled slightly around the hilt of its sword. And still, you continue? The Brahmin nodded. Because all beings cling to life. His voice softened. And precisely for that reason, the offering matters. The mountain spirits began weeping openly now. Golden tears fell onto the frozen earth like drops of light. Even some of the kings could no longer contain themselves. One covered his face. Another fell to his knees. A younger king sobbed quietly into his robes, yet Lajapati remained peaceful. The stars above the mountain seemed impossibly distant now. The Brahmin slowly removed a small ceremonial blade from within his robes. The metal reflected pale moonlight. A collective gasp spread through the gathering. No. Someone whispered. The earth deity stepped forward urgently. Please stop. But Lajapati merely bowed respectfully toward the spirits. For countless ages, he said softly, beings have sacrificed others for themselves. The blade trembled faintly in his hand, not from fear, but from cold. Tonight, let one being sacrifice himself for others. The Yiksha stared motionlessly. The creature's burning eyes flickered violently now. Inside its monstrous chest, ancient hunger battled against something unfamiliar. Something painful. Something almost human. Lajapati took a slow breath. Then he spoke once more beneath the falling snow. This body is temporary. His hand tightened around the blade. This mind is temporary. The mountain wind circled through the cedar grove. All things borrowed from the world must eventually return. The Brahmin lifted the blade toward his chest. The kings cried out immediately, "Stop!" Several rushed forward instinctively. But the earth beneath them suddenly trembled. A wave of invisible force spread outward from Lajapati's body. Not violent, not angry, but impossibly still. The kings froze in place. The mountain spirits lowered their heads in awe. Because the Brahmin's mind had entered complete fearlessness. The snow itself seemed to slow around him. Lajapati closed his eyes briefly. And in that final silence before blood, he made a vow deep within his heart. If there exists a path beyond suffering, may this act lead all beings toward it. Then, with calm hands, he drove the blade into his own chest. The sound was small, terribly small. Yet in that instant, the entire mountain shook. The blade disappeared into flesh. For one suspended instant, the world forgot how to breathe. The sound itself was almost nothing. A soft tearing beneath layers of cloth and skin. Yet the moment steel entered the Brahmin's chest, the entire mountain convulsed. A violent tremor rippled through the snowy cliffs. Ancient trees bent beneath invisible force. Frozen rivers cracked open with thunderous echoes. Birds sleeping miles away exploded into the dark sky. The 1,000 kings staggered in horror. Some cried out. Others collapsed to their knees. The mountain spirits covered their glowing faces as tears of golden light streamed through their fingers. And still, Lajapati did not scream. The blade remained buried deep within his chest. Blood slowly spread across his robes like black ink blooming through crimson silk. Snowflakes landed upon the wound and melted instantly. The Yiksha stared down at him in absolute silence. Its enormous body no longer moved. Its burning eyes widened, not with hunger now, but with disbelief. The Brahmin's breathing became shallow. Yet even through pain, his face remained strangely peaceful. The elder king stumbled forward desperately. "Stop this." His voice broke. "Please, enough." But Lajapati gently raised one trembling hand, asking him not to come closer. The old king froze, tears streaming down his face. The Brahmin slowly looked toward the gathering. His lips had already begun turning pale. "All of you," he whispered weakly, "listen carefully." The snowstorm around them softened. Even the mountain wind seemed to lean inward to hear his final words. For countless lifetimes, we have feared losing what was never permanent. Blood dripped slowly onto the white ground beneath him. We protect the body, yet cannot stop aging. Another breath. We cling to life, yet cannot stop death. The kings wept openly now. Some buried their faces in the snow. Others trembled violently as though their own hearts had been pierced. Raudrabhuti looked upward toward the dark sky. Clouds drifted slowly across the moon. When fear controls the mind, he whispered, compassion becomes small. The blade trembled faintly inside his chest. But when compassion becomes greater than fear, a faint smile touched his lips. Freedom begins. The earth deity fell to its knees before him. Golden tears struck the frozen ground like rain. Great One, the spirit cried, please preserve your life. But the Brahmin slowly shook his head. No life can be preserved forever. His voice was weaker now. What matters is whether life becomes meaningful before it disappears. The Yaksha's claws tightened violently. The creature's breathing had become uneven. Something inside the demon was breaking. Its hunger still screamed for blood. Yet another sensation, one it had never known before, rose painfully within its chest. Shame, the Yaksha suddenly roared into the sky. The sound shook snow from the mountains. Why? Its molten eyes blazed wildly. Why would you do this for me? The forest trembled. The kings looked toward the demon in shock. Because beneath the rage, they heard confusion. Almost grief. Raudrabhuti slowly lifted his eyes toward the Yaksha. His breathing was ragged now. Because suffering blinds all beings. Blood ran down his fingers as he gripped the blade. When hatred rules the heart, beings forget they are worthy of compassion. The Yaksha staggered backward slightly. Its enormous sword slipped lower toward the ground. The Brahmin continued, if kindness is offered only to the gentle. His voice nearly vanished beneath the wind. Then compassion remains incomplete. The mountain fell silent again. The Yaksha's burning eyes trembled violently. For countless ages, every creature had feared it, hated it, cursed it. No one had ever willingly suffered for its sake. No one had ever looked at it without disgust. And now, a dying man offered his own heart freely. The demon's monstrous breathing became unstable. Its hunger no longer felt triumphant, it felt unbearable. Raudrabhuti slowly wrapped both hands around the blade. The kings realized what he intended. No, several shouted instantly. But the Brahmin had already made peace with pain. With slow, deliberate movement, he pulled the sword free from his chest. Blood poured across the snow. The mountain spirits cried out in anguish. Several kings fainted. The earth itself groaned beneath the weight of the moment. Yet somehow, Raudrabhuti remained standing. Barely. His body swayed weakly beneath the moonlight. The Yaksha stared at the blood flowing from the wound. Its nostrils flared instinctively. Ancient hunger surged through its monstrous body. The scent of warm human blood filled the freezing air. The demon's claws trembled. Its fangs slowly emerged. The kings recoiled in horror. It's losing control. The Yaksha took one heavy step forward. Then another. The earth shook beneath each movement. The mountain spirits cried out desperately. But Raudrabhuti did not retreat. Instead, with blood running down his robes, the Brahmin reached toward his own chest. His fingers disappeared into the open wound. The kings screamed in horror. The Yaksha froze, slowly, through unbearable agony. Raudrabhuti pulled his own heart free. Steam rose from the living organ into the frozen night air. Blood dripped between his fingers onto the snow below. The entire world seemed to stop. Even the wind vanished. The stars themselves felt distant and silent. The Brahmin lifted the trembling heart toward the Yaksha. This body. His voice was barely audible now. was never mine to keep. The Yiksha stared at the offering with burning eyes filled not with hunger, but terror. Lajapati smiled faintly through the pain. May this act become a lamp for beings lost in darkness. Then slowly, with the last strength remaining in his body, he offered his heart to the demon. And heaven itself began to weep. The heart trembled in Lajapati's hands. Warm blood flowed between his fingers and fell onto the snow in dark crimson streams. Steam rose from the living flesh into the freezing mountain air. The Yiksha stared at it motionlessly. Its enormous body seemed caught between two worlds. One ruled by ancient hunger, the other by a pain it could neither understand nor escape. The 1,000 kings watched in frozen horror. Some could no longer bear the sight. Others stared without blinking, as though witnessing something beyond human comprehension. The mountain spirits wept openly. Golden tears covered the earth like scattered stars. And still, Lajapati held out his heart. Not with anger, not with despair, but with compassion. The Yiksha's claws trembled violently. Its breathing became harsh and uneven. Inside the creature, centuries of savage instinct screamed louder than thought. Blood, flesh, hunger. The scent filled the night like fire. The demon's fangs slowly emerged. Its burning eyes widened. And then, with a roar that shook the valleys, the Yiksha lunged forward. The kings cried out in terror. Several mountain spirits turned away. The demon seized the heart from Lajapati's hands. For one brief moment, the Brahmin swayed weakly beneath the moonlight, empty blood pouring from his chest. Yet even now, his face remained peaceful. The Yiksha stared at the living heart in its claws. Something inside it still resisted. Some final fragment of hesitation. But hunger was older than mercy. Older than reflection. Older than reason itself. With trembling violence, the Yiksha devoured the heart. A terrible sound echoed through the mountain forest. Several kings collapsed sobbing into the snow. The earth deity covered its face in grief. And Lajapati, still standing somehow, closed his eyes softly. His body shook once. Then again. Blood continued flowing from the open wound in his chest. yet his lips moved faintly. The elder king stumbled closer, weeping. "What are you saying?" The Brahman's voice was barely audible. "May all beings be free from suffering." The mountain wind carried those words into the dark night. The Yiksha froze. Its monstrous body suddenly trembled violently. The kings looked upward in confusion. The demon's breathing became unstable. Its burning eyes flickered wildly. Because the taste filling its mouth was unlike anything it had ever consumed before. Not hatred. Not terror. Not rage. Compassion. The Yiksha staggered backward. A deep, terrible cry escaped its throat. It sounded less like triumph and more like agony. Suddenly the sky exploded with thunder. Not from storm clouds. The heavens themselves had begun to shake. Blinding light flashed across the snowy peaks. The earth split open in distant valleys. And from every direction of the mountain, dark shadows began moving. The kings turned in horror. More Yikshas, for monstrous demons descended from the cliffs and forests surrounding the grove. Each larger than elephants. Each carrying weapons stained black with ancient blood. Their eyes burned with savage excitement. They had smelled flesh. Warm human flesh. The first Yiksha turned toward them instinctively. Its enormous jaws still dripped crimson. The newcomers roared triumphantly. Blood. Living flesh. Share the offering. The mountain spirits cried out in despair. No. But the demons had already arrived. The four Yikshas rushed toward Lajapati's dying body. The kings screamed. Several attempted to run forward. Yet terror rooted them to the ground. The first demon tore into the Brahman's shoulder. Another seized his arm. A third ripped open flesh from his side. The fourth laughed wildly as blood covered the snow. The sound was unbearable. Bones cracked. Flesh tore. Snow turned scarlet beneath the moonlight. The 1,000 kings wept openly. Some vomited from horror. Others collapsed entirely. The earth deity cried out toward heaven, "Enough!" But the demons continued feeding. Only Lajapati made no sound. Not one scream escaped him, though his body was torn apart beneath the claws of monsters. His face remained strangely serene. The Yikshas devoured him piece by piece beneath the freezing stars. And as they fed, the heavens darkened further. The moon lost its light. The stars dimmed. Even the sun, though far beyond the horizon, seemed to withdraw its radiance from the world. Then came the thunder again. Not from clouds, but from emptiness itself. The sky roared without storm. The mountain spirits fell prostrate in terror and sorrow, because nature itself mourned the death of a being whose compassion had surpassed fear. At last, the demons finished feeding. Blood covered their claws and jaws. The snow around them had become a field of crimson. Only fragments of torn robes remained upon the ground. The 4 Yakshas laughed savagely. They rose into the air above the grove like gigantic shadows. But the first Yaksha, the one who had spoken with Raudrabhuti, did not laugh. It remained standing silently in the blood-stained snow. Something inside the creature had changed forever. The other demons roared triumphantly toward the 1,000 kings. Who among you can equal this offering? Their voices shook the mountains. Who among gods or men would surrender life so completely? The kings could not answer, because every one of them knew. They had just witnessed a compassion beyond ordinary understanding. The 4 Yakshas circled high above the grove. He alone truly sought the great path. He alone abandoned self completely. He alone gave without fear. Their monstrous voices echoed endlessly through the snowy valleys. And beneath the darkened heavens, the blood of the Brahmin soaked silently into the sacred mountain earth. The 4 Yakshas circled above the grove like monstrous vultures. Their laughter echoed endlessly through the snowy valleys. Blood still dripped from their claws. Fragments of torn flesh hung between their fangs. The mountain spirits turned away in grief. Several kings knelt motionless in the blood-stained snow, unable to lift their heads. And at the center of the ruined grove, the first Yaksha stood alone, silent. The demon stared at the crimson ground where Raudrabhuti had fallen. Only scattered robes remained. A torn strand of cloth moved softly in the cold wind. The Yaksha's enormous chest rose and fell heavily. Inside it, something unbearable had awakened. The other demons descended from the sky one by one. Their monstrous bodies shook with savage delight. Magnificent flesh, one roared. His blood burned like sacred fire, shouted another. A third laughed wildly. Never have I tasted such strength. The fourth Yaksha raised its bloody weapon triumphantly. This human died better than kings. Their cruel laughter thundered through the mountain night. But the first Yiksha did not join them. It remained staring silently at the snow. One of the demons noticed. "Brother," it growled, "why are you silent?" No answer came. The second Yiksha laughed mockingly. "Has compassion made you weak?" The others roared with amusement. Yet still, the first Yiksha remained motionless. Because within its monstrous mind, the final words of Lajapati would not disappear. "May all beings be free from suffering." Again, and again, and again. The sentence echoed endlessly inside the creature like a bell ringing through darkness. The Yiksha clenched its claws. Why? Why would a dying man speak blessings instead of hatred? Why offer kindness to the very creature devouring him? The demon's breathing became rough. Its molten eyes flickered violently. For countless ages, it had fed upon terror. It understood screams. It understood rage. It understood desperation. But this compassion, was something far more terrifying. The third Yiksha suddenly kicked aside a blood-stained fragment of cloth. "Humans are fools," it sneered. "They cling to strange ideas before death." The others laughed again. But the first Yiksha roared suddenly. "Enough!" The sound exploded across the mountain. The other demons froze. Even the kings looked upward in shock. The first Yiksha trembled violently. Its claws dug deep into the frozen earth. "Do not mock him." The four demons stared in disbelief. One growled carefully, "He was prey." The first Yiksha's eyes blazed brighter. "No." Its voice cracked like splitting stone. "He gave freely." Silence spread through the grove. The other demons exchanged uneasy glances. Because something impossible was happening. A Yiksha, a devourer of flesh, was beginning to feel reverence. The second demon snarled angrily. "You shame yourself." But the first Yiksha barely heard him. Inside its mind, memories long buried beneath endless hunger had begun to surface. A child crying in darkness. Coldness. Loneliness. Fear. Before becoming monster. Before bloodlust consumed everything. There had once been suffering. The demon staggered backward. It pressed enormous claws against its head as though trying to crush the thoughts away. But Lajapati's final expression remained burned into its memory. No hatred. No curse. Only compassion. The Yiksha suddenly roared toward the heavens. "Why does this pain exist?" The sky answered with distant thunder. The mountain spirits slowly lifted their heads. The earth deity gazed upon the demon with deep sadness. Because the creature's suffering had finally become visible. The first yiksha turned toward the kings below. Its molten eyes no longer burned only with violence. Now they carried confusion, grief, and something dangerously close to awakening. You kings! Its monstrous voice trembled. You abandoned kingdoms seeking truth. None answered. The yiksha looked down at the blood covering its claws. But this human. Its breathing shook violently. He possessed something greater than fear. The elder king slowly raised tear-filled eyes. Yes, he whispered. The yiksha stared at him. What was it? The old king's voice trembled beneath the falling snow. He no longer protected himself. The words pierced the demon more deeply than any blade. For endless ages, the yiksha had protected only hunger, protected pain, protected rage, protected emptiness. And because of that, its suffering had never ended. The first yiksha looked upward toward the dark heavens. Snow drifted across its monstrous face, for the first time in countless centuries. The creature no longer felt victorious after feeding. It felt broken. The other demons grew restless. This weakness disgusts me, one snarled. Another pointed toward the kings. There are still more humans to devour. Several kings recoiled in terror. But before the demons could move, the first yiksha suddenly lifted its enormous sword. The black blade burst with violent crimson light. The other demons froze. This offering was sacred, the first yiksha growled. No further blood will be spilled tonight. The four demons stared in disbelief. One laughed mockingly. Since when do yikshas protect humans? The first yiksha slowly turned toward him. Its burning eyes now carried terrifying fury. Since one human showed greater courage than all demons combined. Silence crashed across the mountain. Even the storm winds stopped. The king stared upward in astonishment. Because the impossible had happened. The compassion of one dying man had planted doubt inside a monster. The fourth yiksha snarled. You are becoming weak. But the first yiksha answered quietly, no. Its claws tightened around the sword. I am beginning to see. The heavens rumbled once more. And high above the sacred mountain, hidden beyond clouds and stars, countless unseen beings watched in silence. Because on that terrible night of blood and snow, even a demon had taken its first step toward awakening. The snowy mountains slowly faded. The howling winds, the blood-stained grove, the grieving spirits, the trembling yakshas, all dissolved like mist beneath morning light. And once again, the monks found themselves sitting quietly within Jetavana Monastery. Oil lamps flickered softly in the darkness. Outside, night insects sang beneath the trees. Yet no one moved. No one even dared to breathe too loudly, because the weight of the story still pressed heavily upon every heart. Several monks had tears in their eyes. Others stared silently at the floor. The image of the Brahmin offering his own heart remained alive inside them like fire that could not be extinguished. The Buddha sat calmly beneath the golden lamplight. His face remained peaceful. But the silence surrounding him now felt deeper than before. At last, one elderly monk slowly bowed forward. "Blessed One." His voice trembled slightly. Did the Yiksha truly awaken after witnessing such compassion? The Buddha looked upon him gently. "Seeds planted through suffering," he said softly, "may sleep for many lifetimes before they bloom." The monks listened carefully. The Buddha continued, "That Yiksha carried the memory of compassion long after that night ended." The monastery remained utterly still. Though darkness continued to follow him through many births, the seed had already entered the heart. A younger monk lowered his eyes thoughtfully. Another whispered quietly, "Even demons may change." The Buddha nodded. All beings possess the possibility of awakening. The words moved through the assembly like warm wine through winter trees. Then another monk raised his hands respectfully. "World-honored one, who was the Brahmin Lajapati?" The entire gathering became silent again. Because deep within themselves, many already sensed the answer. The Buddha lowered his gaze briefly. And when he spoke again, his voice seemed filled with immeasurable distance. "In that lifetime." He paused softly. "The Brahmin Lajapati was myself." A wave of emotion passed through the monks. Several immediately bowed until their heads touched the floor. Others felt tears welling uncontrollably in their eyes. The Buddha remained calm. "The 1,000 will-turning kings," he continued, "are the disciples gathered before me now." The monks trembled. Suddenly the story no longer felt distant. They themselves had stood upon that snowy mountain long ago. They themselves had witnessed the offering. The elder monk whispered shakily, "Then the 5 Yakshas." The Buddha nodded slowly. "They are the beings who later became the 5 great tempters and obstructors of the way." Several monks felt chills run through their bodies. The Buddha's eyes remained compassionate. "In countless lifetimes," he said, "beings meet again and again through karma, hatred, love, fear, debt, and compassion." The oil lamps flickered gently beside him. "Some relationships continue through violence. Others through attachment. others through suffering. His gaze softened. But the deepest transformations arise through compassion freely given. The monastery remained silent except for the distant sound of night wind. One monk finally gathered courage to speak. "Blessed One, when you offered your body to the Yiksha," his voice faltered, "did you not feel anger?" The Buddha smiled faintly. "No." The monks looked up in astonishment. The Buddha continued gently, "Pain was present. Fear was present, but hatred was absent." Those words settled into the silence like falling snow. "Hatred," the Buddha said softly, "only continues the chain of suffering." His eyes moved across the assembly. If one being harms another out of pain, and the second answers with hatred, then suffering merely changes shape and survives. Several monks lowered their heads, because they recognized this truth within themselves. The Buddha raised one hand slightly. But compassion interrupts the chain. The lamp flames flickered beside him. Compassion does not erase pain instantly. It does not magically remove evil. His voice remained calm and steady. But it prevents suffering from reproducing itself endlessly. The monks sat perfectly still. Outside the monastery, the night seemed impossibly vast. The Buddha looked upward toward the darkness beyond the trees. "In that distant life," he said, "I had not yet become fully awakened." The monks listened closely. "I still possessed fear. Still possessed attachment. Still possessed uncertainty." The Blessed One's voice softened further. "But through the offering of body and blood, the mind gradually learned not to cling to self above all beings." A deep stillness filled the monastery. Many imagine enlightenment to be the gaining of something. The Buddha shook his head gently. In truth, awakening is often the gradual disappearance of selfishness. Several monks felt their hearts tremble hearing those words. The Buddha continued, "The body fears death naturally. The mind fears loss naturally." He placed one hand softly upon his chest. "But wisdom begins when compassion becomes greater than self-protection." Silence followed. Long, profound, living silence. Then one young monk quietly asked, "Blessed One, must all seekers sacrifice themselves in such a way?" The Buddha turned toward him kindly. "No." Relief spread visibly through the younger monks. The Buddha smiled gently. "Not all offerings require blood." The atmosphere softened slightly. To give patience when anger arises, to give forgiveness when wounded, to give kindness when fear says withdraw. His eyes shone warmly. These too are forms of great sacrifice. The monks listened deeply. True generosity, the Buddha said, is the surrender of selfishness. The night insects outside continued singing beneath the stars. And this surrender, he whispered, may happen through 1,000 small acts, or through one great act. The elder monk bowed low once more. Blessed One, why tell us this story tonight? The Buddha became silent for a long moment. The oil lamps flickered softly against the darkness. Then he answered, because many seekers wish to escape suffering. His voice became almost like distant wind. But few are willing to love beings who create suffering. The monks felt those words pierce deeply into their hearts. The Buddha closed his eyes briefly. When compassion reaches even the terrifying, a faint peacefulness touched his expression. The path toward Buddhahood truly begins. And beneath the quiet night of Jetavana, no one spoke again for a very long time. The night inside Jetavana monastery grew deeper. The oil lamps burned low. Their golden flames trembled gently in the darkness, casting long shadows across the silent hall. No monk wished to leave. No one wished to break the stillness that now surrounded the Buddha like a vast invisible ocean. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. Somewhere far away, a bell sounded once in the night. Then silence returned again. The monk sat motionless, each carrying the story within his own heart. Some thought about the snowy mountain. Some remembered the image of the yiksha trembling before compassion. Others could not stop seeing the Brahmin standing beneath the moonlight, holding his own heart in bleeding hands. At last, a young monk quietly spoke. Blessed One. His voice barely rose above the sound of the wind. How can ordinary people follow such a path? The Buddha looked toward him gently. You believe the path begins with great sacrifice, he said softly. The monk lowered his eyes. Does it not? The Buddha smiled faintly. No. The hall remained silent. Then the Buddha raised one hand slightly toward the flickering lamp beside him. A great fire, he said, begins with a single flame. The monks watched the small golden light carefully. So too does compassion. The Buddha's voice flowed calmly through the darkness. A person does not suddenly abandon all fear in one night. His gaze moved across the assembly. First, one learns to remain patient during irritation. The lamp flame flickered softly. Then one learns kindness during disappointment. The night wind whispered through the monastery walls. Then forgiveness during betrayal. Several monks slowly lowered their heads, because each step already felt difficult. The Buddha continued, and eventually, through countless small acts of courage, the heart grows larger than fear itself. Silence followed once more. But now the silence felt warmer, less heavy, like snow beginning to melt beneath dawn light. The elder monk who had spoken earlier bowed deeply again. Blessed One, why is compassion so difficult? The Buddha closed his eyes briefly. Because the self is frightened. The answer was simple. Yet it entered every heart in the hall like an arrow. The mind fears losing comfort, losing identity, losing control, losing what it calls mine. The Buddha opened his eyes again. And from that fear, greed appears. Anger appears. Violence appears. The monks listened carefully. But when one deeply understands impermanence, the Buddha gently touched the wooden floor beside him. Clinging slowly weakens. The lamps crackled quietly. A person who understands impermanence realizes, nothing can truly be possessed forever. Outside, leaves rustled softly beneath the night sky. Wealth disappears. Beauty disappears. Power disappears. Even the body disappears. The Buddha's voice remained perfectly calm. So the wise do not build their lives upon possession. One monk whispered, then what should we build life upon? The Buddha looked toward him compassionately. Upon understanding. Another silence. Then, upon kindness. And finally, upon the wish that all beings suffer less. The young monk who had first spoken felt tears gather in his eyes. Because for the first time, enlightenment no longer sounded distant or impossible. It sounded human. Quiet. Difficult. But human. The Buddha looked out into the darkness beyond the monastery doors. In every age, he said softly, the world produces fear. His words drifted like smoke through the hall. Fear of loss. Fear of death. Fear of others. Fear of loneliness. The monks listened without moving. And because beings are afraid, the Buddha's expression became deeply compassionate. They wound one another. The wind outside grew slightly stronger. But the one who understands suffering deeply, his voice lowered almost to a whisper, stops asking, who deserves compassion? The hall became utterly still, and instead asks, how may suffering end? Those words seemed to enter the darkness itself. The Buddha then looked once more at the trembling lamp beside him. Lajapati offered his body long ago. The flame reflected softly in his eyes. But the true offering was not flesh. The monks listened closely. It was the abandonment of hatred. A deep silence filled the monastery once more. Many beings can die bravely, the Buddha said. Few can love bravely. Outside, clouds slowly drifted across the moon. The Buddha's voice became softer still. To protect only those who are gentle is easy. The monks remained perfectly still. But to keep compassion alive even before cruelty. The Buddha closed his eyes briefly. That is the beginning of Buddhahood. The oil lamps burned lower now. Their light grew faint and golden against the endless night. One by one, the monks slowly bowed their heads. Not out of ritual, but because something inside them had changed. The story no longer felt like a distant legend. It had become a mirror. A question. A path. The Buddha finally rose slowly from his seat. His robes moved softly like flowing water. Before leaving the hall, he spoke one final sentence into the darkness. Remember this well. The monks lifted their eyes. The measure of wisdom is not how much suffering one escapes. The Buddha looked toward the silent night beyond the monastery. But how much suffering one can meet without losing compassion. Then he walked quietly into the darkness. The lamps flickered once. The night wind moved gently through the trees. And somewhere beyond the sleeping world, the first faint light of dawn had already begun to rise.